Hey everybody, this video is called David versus Ammonites, and tonight we're continuing our study through the book of 2 Samuel, where we're looking at the 10th chapter, where we're going to look at David defeating the Ammonites. So chapter 10 verse 1 and 2 says, "It happened after this that the king of the people of Ammon died, and Hanun his son reigned in his place. Then David said, I will show kindness to Hanun, the son of Nahash, as his father showed kindness to me." So David sent by the hand of his servants to comfort him concerning his father, and David's servants came into the land of the people of Ammon. So the king of Ammon was Nahash, and he was an enemy of Saul, but we see that he was a friend and supporter of David. And it was implied that David and Nahash had entered into a covenantal relationship on the basis that David desired to communicate and continue in his loyalty to Nahash's son Hanun. And 1 Chronicles chapter 19 also covers this defeat. In verse 3 through 5 it says, "And the princes of the people of Ammon said to Hanun, their lord, do you think that David really honors your father because he has sent comforters to you? Has David not rather sent his servants to you to search the city, to spy it out, and to overthrow it? Therefore Hanun took David's servants, shaved off half of their beards, cut off their garments in the middle at their buttocks, and sent them away. When they told David, he sent to meet them, because the men were greatly ashamed. And the king said, wait at Jericho until your beards have grown, and then return." So the city that is spoken of in verse 3 is Rabbah. And forced shaven, it was considered an act that was to be an insult and a sign of submission. And to those who wore the long garments in that time, exposure of the buttocks was a shameful practice inflicted on prisoners of war. And perhaps in chapter 6, verse 14 through 20, that this was partly the concern of Michal in regard to David's dancing. And Jericho was the first place west of the Jordan River that would have been able to be reached by the servants of David as they returned from Rabbah. And to insult the ambassador, it's like to insult the king. It wasn't going to be something taken lightly. In verse 6 and 7 it says, "When the people of Ammon saw that they had made themselves repulsive to David, the people of Ammon sent and hired the Syrians of Beth Rehob and the Syrians of Zobah, 20,000 foot soldiers, and from the king of Maacah 1,000 men, and from Ishtob 12,000 men. Now when David heard of it, he sent Joab and all the army of the mighty men." So Beth Rehob is an Aramean district located southwest of Zobah, and Maacah is in the region north of Lake Hurrah, north of Galilee. And Ishtob was a city east of the Jordan River that was approximately 45 miles northeast of Rabbah. And hiring another nation military was a common practice in the ancient world. And in 1 Chronicles chapter 19 verse 6 it says that the Ammonites paid 1,000 talents to the Syrians. And this is the first mentioned here of David's mighty men, calling them from the army of the mighty men. And they were formed as a glorious fighting force. In verse 8 through 12 says, "Then the people of Ammon came out and put themselves in battle, array at entrance of the gate. And the Syrians of Zobah, Beth Rehob, Ishtob, and Maacah were by themselves in the field. When Joab saw that the battle line was against him before and behind, he chose some of Israel's best and put them in battle array against the Syrians. And the rest of the people he put under the command of Abishai, his brother, that he might set them in battle array against the people of Ammon. And then he said, if the Syrians are too strong for me, then you shall help me. But if the people of Ammon are too strong for you, then I will come and help you. Be of good courage, and let us be strong for our people and for the cities of our God. And may the Lord do what is good in his sight. And so we see the Ammonite army was in the city ready for defense, while the Syrian mercenaries were at some distance and encamped in the fields around the city. And Joab divided his forces to deal with both. The mighty men found themselves surrounded. And Joab's strategy was attack when most in this scenario would consider surrender given the circumstance. And when you are surrendered on both sides, it's pretty hard to be bold to want to fight both sides that is around you. But Joab, he gave a great speech before the battle. He is encouraging them courage and strength. And they were able to do so for their people and their cities. And Joab acknowledged that the battle was ultimately the Lord's. And we hear that phrase in the Bible a few times, that the battle belongs to the Lord. In verse 13 and 14 says, so Joab and the people who were with him drew near for the battle against the Syrians, and they fled before him. When the people of Ammon saw that the Syrians were fleeing, they also fled before Abishai and entered the city. So Joab returned from the people of Ammon and went to Jerusalem. And so Joab did not attempt to siege and capture the city of Rabbah at this time, because the time was unseasonable. In verse 15 through 19, to wrap up the chapter, it says, when the Syrians saw that they had been defeated by Israel, they gathered together. Then Hadadezer sent and brought out the Syrians who were beyond the river, and they came to Helam. And Sobach, the commander of Hadadezer's army, went before them. And when it was told David, he gathered all Israel, crossed the Jordan, and came to Helam. And the Syrians set themselves in battle array against David and fought with him. Then the Syrians fled before Israel, and David killed 700 charioteers and 40,000 horsemen of the Syrians. And he struck Sobach, the commander of their army, who died there. And when all the kings who were servants to Hadadezer saw that they were defeated by Israel, they made peace with Israel and served them. So the Syrians were afraid to help the people of Ammon anymore. And so verse 15 through 19, as we see the chapter wraps up, Helam was the place of battle that was approximately 7 miles north of Joab. And all the petty kingdoms of Syria became subject to Israel, and they feared to aid Ammon against Israel. And we see the chapter, it ends with the business of Rabbah. And this chapter was God's gracious warning that David sadly went on to waste. And to wrap up, we see that David sent ambassadors to the Ammonites at the passing of their king. And we see that David showed kindness to Mephibosheth, especially within the last chapter. And he continues to do so with this other pagan king. And we saw the new king of the Ammonites treated Israel's ambassadors shamefully, whose name was Hanun. And we saw the Ammonites and the Israelites, they prepare for war. And we see that Joab divided the army into two groups, and his encouraging speech to be of good courage and of strength. And I want to look at Ephesians chapter 6, verse 10. And it says, "Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in power of his might." And may we remember the source of our strength. Our strength is found in Jesus Christ. And we see Joab defeated the Syrians and the Ammonites, and they retreat to the city of Rabbah. And we see that the chapter ends with David wiping out the Syrian reinforcements. And that's going to wrap up this video, and we'll see you next, as we're going to look at David's adultery, and it's a very hard passage to swallow, the next few chapters. But we will see you next for chapter 11. God bless.